2. Good afternoon, folks. Chief Meteorologist Nick Lilia here with the tropical update brought to you by the good folks at Tropical Pool and Spa for September 13th of 2018. I gave you guys kind of a sneak peek of what's happening out here. Looking at the big picture, we've got Invest 95L, of course, Florence. That's the big name of the game right now. Helene is falling apart. We've got subtropical storm Joyce. And this ragged thing is what's left of Isaac. And, oh yeah, we've got a couple waves trying to come off the coast of Africa, too. A lot to get through in the next little bit. 50% chance of development here on Invest 95L, which is looking, yeah, it's there. We'll see if this thing can even develop before it runs aground. We'll look at the spaghetti plots here in a second. We've got the other little Invest area. Yeah, no, this is different than Florence, which is right here. A 20% chance of development in the next 5 days as a little area of low pressure is actually going to sneak this direction from the east back in behind Florence. Florence itself is in here at winds at 100 miles an hour. This is as of the 4 o'clock update. Winds at 100 miles an hour, gusting to 120, now moving at just 5, count them, miles an hour. Yesterday it was pushing 20 at one point. It's slowed all the way down and is anticipated to make landfall sometime late tonight or early Friday morning. Friday at 1 a.m., here it is. Could be as far north as Morehead City or as far south as still out into the Gulf of, or not the Gulf, into the Atlantic. Saturday morning at 1 a.m., 24 hours later, it may have only made it that far. That's incredible. They're looking at a whole lot of rain out there and then just constant wind. Wind at 100, that's close to the center, but the wind field on this thing stretches out. I mean, the tropical storm wind field is probably about this big. So, I mean, we're talking about tropical storm winds up around Cape Hatteras, Morehead City, as far inland. I think it's maybe 15 to 20 or 30 miles inland right now. I mean, so the wind field on this is pretty massive, and just the constant barrage of wind. It doesn't even have to be strong wind, but just wind in general with all the rain that they're going to get, and trees are most certainly going to come down. Down to the south, we've got Tropical Storm Isaac barely holding on to tropical storm status. Wind at 40, gusting to 50, moving west at 16, currently 220 miles off to the south-southeast of St. Croix. This thing looks pretty ragged. I mean, to me, this looks like an open wave at a still frame. When we put this into motion, it's got a little bit of spin to it, but for the most part, they're thinking just a tropical depression as it makes its way through the Caribbean before it kind of tilts off northwest and toward the Gulf. And then we've got Helene out here. Wind at 65, gusting to 75, 1,000 miles off to the southwest of the Azores. And this thing is actually slated to make it all the way to Ireland and England, which is just amazing. Those poor folks are going to get quite the gales, as they call them, as we head through late this week, early next week, as that moves off to the northwest. And then down to the south, we're still watching another wave coming off the coast of Africa. Not very organized. We've got another one back in behind that that's a little better put together. But things are most certainly slowing down. So that's what's happening right now with the forecast. What's happening with Florence in the future? Well, what's your percent chance that the folks down here deal with tropical storm force wind? Well, it's basically a guarantee in Wilmington, Cape Hatteras, New Bern. Those folks are already dealing with tropical storm force wind. I would argue that even in Fayetteville, they're dealing with it too. And in Florence, South Carolina, they'll have to deal with the same thing. What about the hurricane force wind? I mean, it's probably about a guarantee in Wilmington. But maybe as far north, again, as New Bern, Fayetteville, down toward Myrtle Beach, all within, you know, that 20 to 40% range. So for the most part, the strongest wind with this is going to be offshore. But it's the constant wind and all the rain that's going to be a concern. How much rain? Oh boy. So when you're starting to get into colors that flip back on themselves, when we get into the blues, your black is somewhere around 15. We turn 20 plus when you get into that kind of pinkish purple. When it folds back into a lighter pink, I think that's up around 25 or 30. And I want to say the blue is up over 30 inches, or up over maybe 35 inches of rain. That's a lot of water. Thankfully, it's pretty close to the coast. So, I mean, there's a small area that's dealing with, unlike Harvey, where it was some large area that was dealing with 20-plus inches of rain. But you can see 5 to 10 inches pretty much everywhere across parts of North Carolina. That's the American model. The European is a little more generous with the overall rain totals, showing that a wider swath, North and South Carolina, somewhere between 5 and 10 inches of rain. And even that stretches to the north and into parts of Virginia, too. The USM game, they were playing in Boone, North Carolina, got canceled, rightfully so, because there's going to be a whole lot of water coming out of the sky, and there's really no way for them to get in and out with all the rain and the wind. So that's the reason that it was canceled. It's not that the weather there is going to be too terrible. A little further off to the south, back toward Isaac. Here's your spaghetti plots on Isaac. I mentioned that yesterday, the day before, that we were feeling pretty good about where this is going to be through Saturday. I think the models are getting into better agreement about where we're going to be with this through Sunday, which I tend to think is going to be somewhere around Jamaica, somewhere within, 100 miles of Jamaica, kind of somewhere in this ballpark by Sunday afternoon. We pause this on Sunday morning. Once we get through there and to Monday evening, then we're going to be somewhere south of Cuba, somewhere in the straits between Cuba and the Yucatan, kind of somewhere in this ballpark. Beyond that, we don't know yet. The models are still a little all over the place. Does it turn to the north? Does it get pulled back off to the west? They're pretty much split. We've got some of these that pull it to the west and into Belize, and then we've got some that curly-cue it back to the north and northeast and take it back out to sea. Some, yes, do take it into the Gulf of Mexico. It's something we'll keep an eye on as we head through the next couple of days. Invest 95L, to reiterate, I've been saying this the last couple of days, not an us problem. It's a Texas problem. 750 moisture, 850 vorticity. Looking at the big picture, mainly trying to ID what's next for us here along the Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. There's Isaac there, Florence there, Helene there, Joyce there. Wave coming off of the coast of Africa there. And as we head through the next few, we get some dry air into the Gulf. Isaac basically falls apart according to this model. There's that 20% area that was back in behind Florence near Bermuda. Notice this kind of floats around out here and eventually gets caught up in a front. Doesn't really bother anybody. And then we get this dry air coming off the coast of Africa that settles across the entire open Atlantic, which would be fantastic news for slowing down the tropics. We would probably still see waves kind of slide underneath this. They would kind of come off the coast and maybe ride a little further to the south. But for the most part, as we head through Wednesday and next week, things do slow down. I wanted to point out, okay, let's go out into voodoo land. And we can talk about, okay, so what would happen if Isaac got into the Gulf of Mexico? Well, let's look at the upper level pattern, and we can kind of figure out where it may feel like it would want to go by looking at our 500 millibar wind chart. By the way, there's Florence, and it's going to ride around this ridge of high pressure here. Anywhere you get into the pinks, and so pink that it's almost white, this big ridge of high pressure. You get into the yellows, so that's areas of low pressure. Okay, sweet. Well, let's look down here a little closer to home as we head through next week. Here we are on a Monday and Tuesday. Here's one ridge here and another ridge down here. And stuff moves around a ridge of high pressure clockwise. So it's going around this one like this, and then we're going around this one kind of like that. So if there was Isaac down here in the Straits, so there's Cuba, there's the Yucatan there. If it was down there, we can set this into motion, would it be able to make it to Mississippi? Well, we got a big ridge of high pressure. Again, it kind of goes like this, and everything goes around it like this. That includes tropical systems. Tropical systems never make a beeline for the middle of high pressure. They tend to ride around it because high pressure tends to go to low pressure. That's kind of how air in the atmosphere works. Low pressure doesn't go toward high pressure. So it would tend, any system would tend to go around what's happening here. So here's Wednesday of, and let me go back, here's Wednesday of next week. We'll slide this through again. There's Sunday and a Monday and Tuesday and into Wednesday. There we go. So we have kind of a fullback in our backyard here, kind of blocking anything that would want to come here. Could this change? Absolutely it could change. Will it change? Probably. But the good news is we've already ID'd an opportunity to have high pressure at least in the neighborhood. Now, if this slides a little further to the east, unfortunately, the same thing that, again, everything going clockwise, the same thing, if you slide this direction, would actually pull Isaac toward us. If it's a little further off to the west, it would push it, instead of just blocking, it would push it a little further to the south and push it to the west and into parts of Mexico. So this is the thing we're watching as we head through the next couple of days, is we keep our eyeballs on what's happening with Isaac. Whether or not it's a tropical storm, tropical depression, oh boy, it doesn't matter. Once it gets into the Gulf, then we have to watch and see what's going on with it, because we have to watch the upper level winds. So anyway, there's a look at your tropical update and all the details hopefully you could possibly imagine to want. Brought to you by the good folks at Tropical Pool and Spa.